Am I here? Can you guys see me? Hello? Is anybody there? Well, since I'm live, I might as well keep things rolling. Welcome back, guys and gals. I'm Jason the Cartoon Fan. And on this month in 2016, Nickelodeon properly introduced us to the comedic misadventures of a family with 11 kids and their wacky neighbors, thus breathing new life into the dying network known as Nickelodeon. To celebrate the Loud House turning 6 years old on May 2nd, 2022, I'm doing a special live stream in which I answer questions that I received from you viewers about the show. Sadly, however, I didn't have enough time to write down answers to every question that I received for this stream. But I'll definitely find a way to incorporate what ended up on the cutting room floor for a future live stream of mine. I already have plenty to talk about when it comes to the topic at hand, so let's get to it. But before I do, I want to give a very special congrats to the social media friend who I've been hanging out with for the longest, Ryan's Treasures. Ryan just graduated from college yesterday, and he has an even bigger passion for the Loud House franchise than I do. If you're watching this video, Ryan, consider it my graduation gift for you, since you'll get to hear about my experiences with its subject in far greater detail than in any of my previous videos. Without further ado, it's question answering time. Alrighty, so the first question I received is from my good, more recent social media buddy, Jacob, aka GameTune. What was the first episode of The Loud House that you ever saw? Hold on, let me check real quick. I'm pulling up these answers as I'm recording. Oh, geez. It's been so long since I started watching The Loud House. I actually don't remember. But I can tell you the story of how I was introduced to the series. It was January 2017, and I was looking for another new cartoon to get excited about. At the time, I was obsessed with Steven Universe, Star vs. the Forces of Evil, and Milo Murphy's Law, and just got into Gravity Falls. However, Cartoon Network only aired Steven back then when it had new episodes on Friday nights. And since I didn't have Disney XD or Hulu until June 2017, the only way I could check out the 3 Disney cartoon shows was through their repeats on the main Disney Channel, who only aired them on who only aired them on weekend mornings. In other words, I didn't have any cartoons to enjoy during my days of high school after class and homework, so I wanted to fill up that empty gap in my TV time. 14-year-old me became so desperate, I even started tuning into Nickelodeon, The former childhood centerpiece of mine that I had previously given up on after they started relying exclusively on shows that I couldn't understand the appeal of at all. Then, almost as if by chance, I discovered it. An animated series chronicling, I'm not sure exactly how that's pronounced, the wacky but heartfelt misadventures of an average 11-year-old and his overbearing but lovable ensemble of a family. I was immediately hooked, and I started watching Nickelodeon every Monday through Thursday solely for The Loud House, making sure to watch at least one episode of the series on each of those days. When Disney Channel discontinued their reruns of the XD cartoons in May 2017, my consumption of The Loud House got even bigger, as it immediately took up those other shows' spots in my TV consumption routine. At least until OKKO Let's Be Heroes came along. Combine my near daily Loud House viewings with the fact that Nickelodeon tended to favor certain episodes over others when it came to okay, let me restart that sentence. Combine my near daily Loud House viewings with the fact that Nickelodeon tended to favor reruns of certain episodes over others, even that early on, and I ended up watching the same 15 or so installments over and over again, with that amount very gradually increasing as Nickelodeon kept premiering more episodes. Even with that heavy repetition, I just couldn't get enough of The Loud House, and it barely having any ongoing story threads like my other favorite currently running cartoons at the time meant that I could jump into any episode without having to remember a bunch of stuff from prior installments. Don't get me wrong. I tried the other newer Nickelodeon shows that were airing around the same time, but with the exception of the upbeat and mellow misadventures of a kind-hearted talking bird, I couldn't really get into any of them on nearly the same level as The Loud House. Because of my circumstances regarding the show, people might point out that The Loud House could fit the definition of a rainy day series, i.e. the show to watch when nothing else is on, which is why I consumed it so much. However, that couldn't be any further from the truth. The Loud House is a cartoon that I hold near and dear to my heart. And I'm dead serious when I say that I appreciate it just as much as shows like Steven Universe and Amphibia. Which, by the way, speaking of Amphibia, rest in peace, Amphibia. You had a good run. I would watch the series finale right now, but I'm too busy with this stream. Sorry. Alright, back on topic. Unlike most of my other favorite cartoons, however, I didn't come to the show. It came to me, and I'm eternally grateful for that. Want to know exactly how big my devotion to The Loud House really is? I own all of the Region 1 DVD releases from Paramount Home Entertainment, quite a few of the show's figures and plushies from Wicked Cool Toys and Toy Factory, and a vast majority of the Loud House comic books from Paper Cuts. Not to mention that I was absolutely devastated when a major controversy regarding the show's creator, Chris Savino, came to light, which I won't get into detail here, in order to keep this live stream PG. Unfortunately, my parents decided to completely get rid of cable at the end of June 2019, so I wasn't able to catch anything from The Loud House beyond season 3 unless if I was lucky enough to visit a friend or relative who still had access to Nickelodeon. That is, until I got Paramount Plus exactly 2 years later in June 2021. Not only did I watch all 3 of the seasons that I had already seen, but I also watched most of season 4 and transitioned smoothly into season 5 when a friend of mine was kind enough to loan me his TV recordings of the show. And now I'm fully caught up on the show. For better or for worse. Don't worry, we'll get back to that a little later. And if you want proof that Nickelodeon has always reran certain Loud House installments far more frequently than others, Paramount Plus had approximately 18 different episodes from the first 3 seasons that I don't remember seeing on Nickelodeon itself, even though those were the only 3 seasons that the network was airing when I had regular access to it. This has given me an unexpectedly unique perspective on the show's most troubling aspect, besides its creator, of course. You see, one of the earliest Loud House episodes that I actually remember seeing was Dance Dance Resolution, which is the episode where I was introduced to Ronnie Anne. At the time, I thought she was just some random tough girl who Lincoln had an unlikely friendship with, like Sam Manson from Danny Phantom, or a much nicer Sam Puckett from iCarly. The next Loud House episode with Ronnie Anne that I saw was Save the Date, and I thought it was a follow-up to that other episode. So I thought, aw, look at how cute Lincoln and Ronnie Anne are in this one. They really are good friends. I wouldn't mind if they got together. Little did I know that I had actually viewed those episodes in reverse chronological order. And I never even heard of heavy metal until I started watching reviews of The Loud House from members of the cartoon community after I had already lost access to Nickelodeon. When Mr. Enter said that Ronnie Anne's relationship with Lincoln was built on a toxic foundation in his review of The Loud House and showed clips from heavy metal to prove his case, I was dumbfounded. Why have I never even known about this episode's existence before? I asked myself. Well, anyways, I watched the episode myself when the time came for me to view it on Paramount Plus, and while it definitely soured my viewpoint on Ronnie-kin, I knew the problem could have easily been fixed by rewriting that episode to make Ronnie Anne just an irritable grouch instead of an outright bully. That way, the Loud House crew's intentions to make Ronnie Anne a character whose negative traits are greatly exaggerated by Lincoln would have been far more apparent, instead of receiving the morbidly disturbing moral we got in the actual episode. And yes, my rewrite suggestions on certain episodes are going to be a recurring feature throughout this video. Alrighty. I don't know why the chat box isn't being shown right now. Here, oh, guys, can you hold on a second? I am going to figure out why the chat box isn't being shown right now. Alrighty, we have the chat box up and running now. I just saw Fairy Princess Valentine's comment. Hi, Sierra. Oh, that's odd. I thought it's... Oh, there we go. Hold on, I'm gonna edit the chat box to make it just a little bit bigger. Oh, Sierra, I'm going to be spoiling a lot in this video. If you do not want to be spoiled about the Loud House at all, do not watch this video. Just click off and go somewhere else. Yeah, I don't know why the chat box is acting as weird as it is. Hold on, I'm checking on it real quick. I'm going to... Maybe increasing the size will make it look better. Hold on, let me see. Alrighty, bye Sierra. I hope you'll enjoy the Loud House when you get the time to watch it. Okay, so let's check in to see who has joined the stream. Hi Dorothy, the UI fanatic. Hi Green Sonic Kid. Hi Alfredo. And hello, Donnie! Oh, mother of mercy! Sorry, I can't help but sneak a clever SpongeBob reference in there. Have you seen any of Yoshi Player's videos? I do not know who that YouTuber is. Sorry, Dorothy. Okay, time to answer another question about the Loud House. Alrighty, so this next question was submitted to me by Kiri Suna Online with 2 exclamation marks at the end of her username. What makes the series important to you? And she put in parenthesis, no disrespect, of course, I've never seen the series, just heard about it. Okay, the Loud House is so special to me because no other cartoon has been quite as relatable. The show revolves around a family with 11 kids sporting unique personalities who live next door to a big cast of eccentric neighbors. Therefore, the series usually deals with the trials and tribulations stemming from being part of such a frantic ensemble of quirky people, with one major exception I'll be ranting about soon. Each of the characters on the Loud House have their own special traits that make them a blast to watch, especially when interacting with each other. The charm that comes from the series, at least to yours truly, is getting to know those characters inside and out, which allows them to showcase a bunch of hidden depth in the process. From a seemingly stock standard goth whose antisocial attitude actually stems from shyness, to a fashionista who has unconditional feelings for a chunky boy because he likes the same things she does, almost every character on the Loud House, emphasis on almost every, has layers of personality, which keeps things from ever getting too boring. Though this comparison might sound blasphemous, the franchise of the past that I can compare the Loud House to the best is the Muppets. Whether it's the huggable monsters living in Sesame Street or the nutty animals and whatevers led by Kermit the Frog, you don't really remember the Muppets for what they do, but rather how they do it. The Muppets can make even the most cliched of situations special with their wit and multi-layered personalities, and so can most of the many characters from the Loud House. The show has a lot of stories that are similar to those used for other cartoons in the past, but Lincoln and family, along with all their friends, and sometimes even enemies, usually make those stories all their own, thanks to how uniquely well-rounded they are. The show also packs in a pure heart, which was desperately needed at a time when everything on Nickelodeon was cynical, eye-rolling irony and cringy attempts at being hip, like regular show without any self-awareness, creative moments, or character growth. Thanks to the Loud House's popularity, combined with Nickelodeon firing Dan Schneider in 2018, the network's content now has a much more upbeat, positive energy to it, with even the more abrasive characters having some amount of charm in them, just like the channel's good old days. I'm glad that we moved away from the era of breadwinners and game shakers in favor of stuff like Middlemost Post and Warped. Nickelodeon still has lots of improving to do, but they're in a much better shape now than they were 8 years ago. And we owe all of that to the Loud House. Oh, and I guess Nickelodeon's decision to get rid of Dan Schneider, too. Let's see. Do I have any more chats? I'm going to try increasing the size of the chat box again to make it more visible. Alrighty, somebody type something into the chat box, and just type something into the chat box so I can see whether or not it the box is bigger on the actual video. There we go. Don't worry, Alfredo. I'll be talking about Luna and Sam very soon. Oh yeah. Getting rid of Sima Zaragami was the other way that Nickelodeon was able to at least partially recover from their dark age of the early to mid 2010s. Hold on a second, guys. I'm going to get some water so I don't strain my voice. Alrighty, it's time for next question. Alright, the third question I got comes from Tess McGrath. Which Loud House character can you relate to the most? OM gosh, so totes Leni. I already talked about what makes the show so special to me, but the most special part of that special element is Leni Loud. On the surface, she seems like your typical blonde doofus. However, she's actually a very sweet, compassionate girl who can be smart at a particular skill when it's something she's interested in, and her ditziness merely stems from her not having the best understanding of social cues or good cognitive retention. She's not dumb per se. She's just she's just built differently. And you probably already know where I'm going from here. Nickelodeon wants you to be convinced that she's dumb, but that's all hiding the truth. Leni is autistic and nothing you say can convince me otherwise. As I've stated plenty of times before, I have autism myself, so I'm more than qualified to give such a diagnosis. Leni was the first animated character on television who I connected to on a mental level in addition to an emotional level. And I wouldn't have that same feeling again until I was introduced to another neurodivergent Nicktoon character, Miko from Glitch Text. Though, unlike Leni, she's canonically neurodivergent, having ADHD. Seeing Leni overcome her own unique obstacles in episodes such as the Driving Miss Hazy and The Boss Maybe was very inspiring to a neurodivergent guy whose only other exposure to autistic characters were all copycats of Sheldon Cooper from The Big Bang Theory. Whenever Leni behaves in a way that makes her siblings confused, I don't laugh at her, but rather with her. I can totally imagine Leni being a character who some autistic kid saw for the first time at a very impressionable young age and made them realize, yep, I'm a simp for tunes. And hey, they wouldn't be alone in this regard. When I first started watching The Loud House as a teen who had just entered high school, I had a major crush on Leni because of her kind heart and relatability. Oh, and also her good looks, but that trait was a lot more superficial when compared to her other attractive qualities. Of course, I'm too old for her now, even after she got aged up in season 5, but I still think she's the best Loud sibling. Not to mention that she totally redefined my criteria for an ideal mate. In many aspects, my love for Leni, and Miko to a lesser extent, has lived on through my love for Entrapta from She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, because the former allowed me to realize that it would be best for me to end up together with another neurodivergent person, leading to my romantic feelings for Entrapta. But my hormones are starting to override my conversation. Let's move on. Okay. Jai says, the Loud House wasn't my cup of tea during its premiere. I was more of a TMNT 2012 fan, and I still don't care for it in my opinion, but it seems like an okay show. That's alright. TMNT 2012 is also a pretty good show. It came before The Loud House, and I kind of stopped watching it around the time, like, before The Loud House even premiered, which is why I didn't bring it up when I said, oh, I tried getting into other newer Nickelodeon shows while also watching The Loud House, but Harvey Beaks was the only one that really spoke to me. What is your favorite season of the show, says Radioactive Animation Studios. Oh, don't worry, I'll get to that. But I have another question that I need to answer first. So here's another question that I got from Jacob, aka GameTune. How would you rank each of the Loud kids? Here's my full ranking of all 11 Loud siblings, organized from lowest to highest on my tier list, along with a brief explanation of why I feel that way about a specific one of them. At the very bottom, number 11, we have Lynn Jr. LJ, as her dad affectionately calls her, isn't as bad as some members of the Loud House fandom make her out to be, but she's the member of the family with by far the least amount of depth, which makes her a bore to watch. Most of the time, she's just your standard aggressive jock character, with no hidden personality layers at all. This is why my personal favorite episodes centered around her are either the ones where she shows signs of vulnerability and affection, like Middlemen and Good Sports, or installments where she's clearly made out to be the bad guy, with the other stars of the episode succeeding at taking her down a peg, like Net Gains and Sitting Bull. At number 10, we have Lily Loud. Lily is just a baby, so there isn't much she's capable of doing to win my attention. Unlike Lynn Jr., however, she at least makes me smile every time I see her, thanks to her overactive imagination, never-ending cheerfulness, and Maggie Simpson-esque slyness. Lily is actually the center of quite a few of my favorite episodes, but the reason why I think they're so great is because of what everybody around her does to make Lily the way she is in a particular installment, such as Potty Mouth, Dream a Lily Dream, and Appetite for Destruction. At number 9, we have Lana Loud. Lana is one of the two main sources of the show's toilet humor, but at least she has a defined personality beyond just being gross, which is what ultimately put her higher on my tier list than Lily. I also appreciated when the series has episodes showcasing how her tomboyish attributes prove to be far more positive characteristics than her siblings often think they are, such as Scales of Justice and Game Off. Not to mention that she makes an entertaining foil to her ultra-girly twin, who I'll be getting around to talking about soon, leading to the 3 Loud House episodes that are by far the most entertainingly laugh out loud, get it, chaotic, Toads and Tiaras, Patching Things Up, and Sister Act. At number 8, we have Lori Loud. Lori? Putting Lori this low on my tier list has me worried that certain diehard Loud House fans are gonna riot in front of my house. I've always wanted to care about Lori more than I actually do. But while I do think she is a very amusing take on the bratty teenage daughter trope, and I sympathized with her struggles at college beginning in season 5, I feel like the controlling, demanding side of her personality sticks out more than the strong-willed, independence-loving side. While the former set of character traits lead to hilarious episodes about her desire for fame and glamour getting way out of hand, such as Party Down, City Slickers, and especially Selfie Improvement, the last of whom being in my top 5 favorite episodes of the entire show, it's hard for me to embrace her the same way that other fans of the series have, when I remember all the times she was too antagonistic towards her siblings. Again, that antagonism is funny, which makes her far more likable to me than Lynn Jr., but I can't really call her a comfort character or anything like that. Seriously. What did Clyde see in her back in the day? Alright. At number 7, we have Lola Loud. On the surface, Lola seems to be just as bossy and easily agitated as Lori, but she actually has far more depth than that. She's a determinator, willing to go up against anybody who dares trying to unfairly take her down, even her own much bigger siblings, which is most noticeable during season 1. Also, her short temper is at least partially made up for by her hidden fears of trying things that she's not used to doing out, leading to heartfelt episodes like Read Aloud and Gownin' Out. Finally, though she and her tomboy twin have engagingly silly contrasting personalities, Lola still appreciates and supports Lana all the way, as she spends time with Lana far more often than Lori and Leni, the two of her siblings who you would expect her to be around the most, considering their similarly feminine traits. Two of the very best episodes from the show's early days, Undie Pressure and A Tattler's Tale, have their conflict started thanks to the extra layers of Lola's personality, and she continues to defy expectations on a semi-regular basis, making her by far the most lovable of the blonde-haired Queen Bee characters in Nickelodeon's ensemble. Unless if you count Courtney Grippling from As Told by Ginger, but she's actually too openly nice to be so easily stereotyped. Alrighty, now is the part that almost everybody who's watching the stream right now has been waiting for. At number 6 on my tier list, we have Luna Loud. Out of all the characters in Loud House history, Luna is the one who I think has developed as a person the most. Now, I'm going to be honest here. When I first started watching The Loud House, Luna was one of my least favorite of the Loud siblings, and I can already feel those Rotten Tomatoes being pelted at me. I know. That would be like saying that Jughead Jones is your least favorite Archie Comics character. But during my initial exposure to the series, I just couldn't understand what made Luna so appealing to a majority of the show's fans. Even more so than Lori. Lincoln, Lucy, Luan, Lola, Lana, Lisa, and Lori. They all wanted to do fun stuff they all wanted to do fun stuff together, even after bickering with each other in a given episode. Luna just wanted to chill and rock out. And to me, there was a far more three-dimensional, relatable take on that character trope, who was only one channel away, Amethyst from Steven Universe. It also didn't help that 90% of Luna's dialogue during season 1 was just references to popular old school rock and roll songs, which got old far quicker for me than Luan's puns. However, once the series finally got Luna off her bed and started displaying the full extent of her love for playing music towards the end of season 1, and even more so from season 2 onwards, I finally started embracing the character just as much as the Loud House's other fans. Luna is at her best when an episode showcases how her devotion to her talent keeps her persevering through rough roads and corporate meddling, which is especially apparent in the show's most acclaimed 22 minutes to date, Really Loud Music, which, yes, I actually do agree with the vast majority is indeed the very best episode of the show's whole run. Plus, the evolution of her relationship with her crush turned girlfriend Sam Sharp is by far the best written of the show's very few attempts at having actual continuity, despite it being undermined pretty badly during a season 5 episode. Trust me, I'll get to that in a bit. I would go into more detail about Luna and Sam's relationship and how significant it was to the animation industry, but you've already heard it a million times before and a million times better by other diehard fans. Don't get me wrong, Lumity is adorable and all, but Suna is where great LGBT representation is really at. And Nickelodeon not only did it 3 years earlier, but was far less in your face about it. So take that, corporate shills at Disney. Alrighty, let's take a look at the chat again. Ethan Archive is asking me which live-action Nickelodeon show you like the most and which Nicktoon you like the most. Favorite Nicktoon? SpongeBob, of course. Favorite live-action Nickelodeon show? Drake and Josh. Despite the recent controversies surrounding one of its most key players. Besides Dan Schneider, of course. Yeah, I do agree, Ethan. Continuity issues are a huge thing in the Loud House. Yeah, but I don't mind too much because it's not designed to be a lore-heavy show like Steven Universe or Amphibia. I know I keep bringing those two up quite a bit of the time, but you know, those are my personal favorites. Jeffy 2010 is here, and he says that he enjoys Nickelodeon the most from around 2009 through 12. Yeah, those eras weren't so bad. I enjoyed True Jackson VP and Victorious and quite a few of the sitcoms from around that time period. Tough Puppy was a really good show. I still don't understand the hate it got. But yeah, around 2012 through 16 or 17 was when things were really dire for Nickelodeon. Alfredo, I think I already answered that question for you pretty well. I enjoyed all the episodes with Sam and Luna, being girlfriends quite a lot. And I think that's cute. Barring one episode from season 5, I'll get to it. Don't worry. Okay. Next question that I received via comments on one of my earlier community posts. No, wait. Hold on. Nope, not quite. We still got 5 more loud siblings to explain my tier choices for. Okay. At number 5 on my loud sibling tier list, we have Lincoln Loud. Lincoln is the loud sibling whose likability is the hardest to describe, in my opinion. He doesn't have one significant trait that makes him stand out from his sisters, other than him being their only brother. And he also doesn't really stick with having just one interest that the show goes into depth exploring his admiration for. However, Lincoln is an appealing character not because he has one specific quirk that makes him entertaining to watch, but rather because he is the all-encompassing depiction of boys around his age, making him the modern Charlie Brown in a sense. If you ever had to deal with overbearing family members or oddball neighbors, you'll instantly find a piece of yourself in Lincoln Loud. He is an everyman in the broadest definition of the term. Whether he's scheming for extra privileges in intense debate and frenzy, trying to impress a crush in Be Stella My Heart, or simply dealing with an aspect of growing up an intern for the worst and deal me out, you never fully stop rooting for Lincoln because you know where he's coming from. You know where he's coming from, which makes you want him to succeed. There are definitely loud siblings whose more specific characteristics make them more engaging, but Lincoln is the member of his family who has the most balanced personality. You get what I'm saying, right? Alrighty. Number 4 on my tier list is Lisa Loud. As a diehard Dexter's Laboratory fan, Lisa succeeded at creating the perfect formula to satisfy my cravings for a modern take on a cartoon revolving around an isolated genius whose intelligence lacks common sense. It's just so gut-bustingly hilarious to see her bumble around with a weird creation or wacky invention at hand, creating all sorts of creatively fantastical tension along the way. At the same time, however, she also has a very blunt, know-it-all way of telling her siblings about something she knows, which is not only just as funny, but keeps her from becoming a complete copycat of Dexter, though admittedly not quite as unique of a take on the kid genius trope as Jimmy Neutron. Also, unlike Dexter, she actually manages to grow true blue friendships with her classmates in spite of her antisocial quirks, which is inspiring to someone who is on the spectrum, like myself. I know I said that Leni might be autistic, but I'm also willing to argue the same for Lisa. Except that if my headcanon is true, then Lisa would have a much higher functioning level of autism than Leni. Okay. Number 3 on my tier list is Luan loud. Luan is not only higher on my tier list than Luna, but has even made it into my top 3 loud siblings. To quote a legendary bald-headed hold on. To quote a legendary bald-headed dimwit, I keep making God madder and madder. But I really can't help myself. I know there are a lot of people who say that Luan didn't become a good character until season 3, and that that all of her prior appearances revolved around her just making crappy puns and pranking her siblings in cartoonishly cruel ways. While I won't lie by saying her early obsession with puns and pranks isn't true, I've always had a soft spot for Luan's shamelessly corny wisecracks. She's just filled with so much positive energy and passion, she even puts Leni to shame. And her enthusiasm never fails to put a warm, cheery smile upon my face, no matter how predictable her humor can get. When Luan isn't grinning at all, you know someone has messed up big time. And I know at least one other person who agrees with me about what I have to say. In spite of the defense I gave her original portrayal, however, my favorite Luan-centered episodes are actually the ones that take Luan beyond her comfort zone and allow her to display a passion for art that we don't see when she isn't the main protagonist of a Loud House story, including any episode revolving around her crush on love interest Benny, and, of course, head poet's anxiety, which is second only to Really Loud Music in terms of top 5 episode territory for me. She may be a comedian first and foremost, but Luan may very well be the most artistically cultured of her siblings. Although her charismatic knack for yucks makes her a great form of comic relief, whenever the classier part of her character shines through, it creates absolute magic. We're almost done with my tier list, I promise. Number 2 is Lucy Loud. Lucy may very well be the very best goth character in all of animation, simply because her personality goes far beyond being creepy, cynical, and hopelessly depressed. She's also an inspiring poet, leading to some of the show's most intelligent, somber writing. Additionally, she's a master of fortune-telling and seances, despite her, most likely, lacking any true magical powers. So why does she tend to keep her distance away from her siblings? Perhaps just as much as Lisa, if not more so. Well, as I alluded to earlier in this live stream, it turns out that her moody gloomy demeanor is actually a cover-up to hide the fact that she's actually a very shy individual who finds making her voice heard extremely difficult, and bonding with someone who is a fun-loving optimist even harder. Combine this shyness with the fact that her love for horror often results in her talking about nothing but that subject whenever she actually feels confident enough to speak. And I believe we have another potentially autistic loud sibling. While not quite as relatable to me as Leni, Lucy still has plenty of moments that really Lucy still has plenty of moments that really speak to me, with the best one, of course, being when she overcomes her stage fright in the aforementioned head poet's anxiety, with a little help from Luan, of course. In fact, it's the episode I'm most likely to use as evidence against the Loud House's detractors when they say that the series can't move people in the same way as more story-heavy cartoons from this day and age. And of course, number one on my tier list, Leni Loud. I already gushed about her for as much as I could earlier in the stream. Need I say more? That's odd. I'm surprised that there haven't been many people watching the stream. Only 7 at the moment. And I haven't gotten any new comments in the chat box in a long while. Am I talking to nobody? Oh, hi. I see your comment, Alfredo. Okay. So now I'm going to make a correction that I probably should have a long while ago. So, originally, Haley Chu, the voice of Stella on The Loud House, said she was going to retire from acting. So, I assumed that that meant she was going to also leave The Loud House, and I made a whole community post about it. But it turns out that actually, she only retired from physical acting, not voice acting. So, yeah, she's still going to be on the show, and she's still going to voice Stella. So, yeah, just wanted to get that out there. Alright, hold on a second. I'm going to get another drink of water. I wish I didn't have to walk all the way over to my refrigerator in order to get a drink. But anyways, time to answer another question. Question number 5 to be exact. And it's also the final question I received from Jacob/GameTune. Who is your favorite non-Loud character on The Loud House? When I first started watching The Loud House, I would have totally answered that question with Mr. Bud Grouse. I always get a laugh out of seeing him flip his lid when the Louds even dare to step foot near him. Thanks to John DiMaggio's over-exaggerated growling voice, Mr. Grouse is Old Man Yells at Cloud taken to the next level. However, after rewatching a boatload of Loud House and Casagrandes episodes on Paramount Plus, let me start from the beginning of that sentence. However, after rewatching a boatload of Loud House and Casagrandes episodes on Paramount Plus, don't worry, I'll talk about the Casagrandes a little bit later on, I think I actually like Bobby Santiago the most. Not only is he a very loving big brother to Ronnie Anne, but I also relate to his tendencies to make drama out of something that isn't really that big of a deal, because I myself can be overly sensitive at times. His clumsiness, though not quite as relatable as Leni's, is still very funny, and I love someone who can make me laugh. Though I'm a little embarrassed to admit it, considering how strange my feelings may seem to somebody who doesn't know the ins and outs of the Loud House franchise as much as I do, I think I just found my latest male fictional character crush. No, wait! Before you call the police on me, I want to remind you that Loud House Season 5 aged him up to 18, and I'm only 19 and a half, so it's perfectly fine for me to say that. Okay. Moving on. Question number 6. What is your opinion on Season 4 and beyond? This question comes from Wizard Dude Reborn. Okay. It's finally time for me to get critical about the Loud House. But hopefully I won't sound too harsh while doing so. Most of my praise for The Loud House is based on the show's first 3 seasons, before Chris Savino was fired from working on his own series. It's no secret that the rest of The Loud House's writing staff has started stumbling across the field without their original coach. With this in mind, however, I don't think The Loud House automatically started declining when Savino left. The final 6 episodes of Season 3 were made without him, and they're just as terrific as that season's prior episodes, though it's possible that they used story ideas pitched when Savino was still on board. Season 4 was definitely a step down in quality, but I still very much enjoyed it for the most part. Sure, we did get the confusing ridiculousness that was washed up, a major retcon ruining one of my favorite Season 2 episodes in Kings of the Con, and Leni's weakest performance to date. But most of these so-called worst episodes were just unremarkable instead of unbearable. Not to mention that we still had bangers like A Pimple Plan, Community Disservice, and Perfect Gig, which remain some of the most excellent showcases of what the series excels at to this very day. Season 5, on the other hand, is a much, much different story. To give credit where credit is due, the Loud House crew knew that the show was running stale after making 104 episodes within the span of only 4 years, so their decision to shake up the show's status quo was a commendable one. On paper, the show's new creative direction sounds like a dream come true. Every character on the series has aged up by 1 year, thus opening a new door of possibilities for what they can do. The actual execution of this new direction, unfortunately, was a fair bit shaky throughout the entire season. Unlike what some people think of it, however, I don't flat out hate Season 5 of The Loud House. In my eyes, it's the most mixed bag of a TV season that I've ever seen, with exactly half of the season being great and exactly half of the season being really, really bad. On one hand, we had terrific episodes like Flying Solo, Undercover Mom, and the aforementioned The Boss Maybe that took advantage of the new possibilities for the characters in a way that felt like a natural way to put a faithful spin on the show's tried and true conventions. On the other hand, though, you had train wrecks like Band Together, Friday Night Fights, and especially Broadcast Blues. God, I hate that episode, which seemed to go out of their way to make you question why you ever became a Loud House fan to begin with. Thanks to cringy writing, nasty characters, nauseating toilet humor, and botched up morals. In other words, when the Loud House gets horrendous, it becomes the very type of Nickelodeon show it killed off. It absolutely hurts my soul when the Loud House gets like that, because it feels like a sellout each and every time this happens. As for where exactly on the Nickelodeon seasonal rot spectrum that Loud House Season 5 goes, I would judge its worst episodes as being somewhere in between as disrespectfully mean-spirited as Seasons 6 and 7 of SpongeBob SquarePants, and as annoyingly smug as Seasons 9 and 10 of The Fairly Odd Parents. In Season 5's stinkers, the show's usually multi-layered characters are reduced to interchangeable jerks, which creates very severe unpleasantness as they all act like asses to each other in a way that the plot demands, regardless of whether or not it fits their established character traits. How would you like to watch Luna gleefully ditch her loyal bandmates, including her girlfriend, just so she can be part of a professional band? Oh, wait, you think it's uncharacteristic because Luna has always been respectful of Sam's feelings in every other episode? Of course! Even better, would you like to watch an episode where Lincoln is blackmailed by a verbally and physically abusive bully in exchange for better broadcast equipment, only for that bully to rub his ego in front of Lincoln's face, thus ruining the integrity of the newscast that Lincoln and his friends are now creating with that equipment? No, because no punishment that bully gets, oh boy, we're going to talk about him soon, will ever be enough karma for such an absolute psychopath? Exactly! Do you get what I'm saying now? To be fair, though, it's not like the elements of Season 5 that made its worst installments suck so badly came out of nowhere. Seasons 1 and 2 had a tendency to portray Lincoln as the member of his family whose wants are always portrayed as being worthy of punishment, which led to the two most well-known of the show's bad episodes, No Such Luck and Brawl in the Family, both stemming from the second season. However, for the most part, the show was grounded in enough reality to ensure that Lincoln's family only acted the way they did in order to teach him a lesson about growing up, not to make his life an unbearable torture. And Lincoln even got a fair compromise regarding what he desired a good 90% of the time. Heck, even when the show's cruelty factor was at its worst during the Savino era, At least there were a decent amount of good jokes, and maybe even one or two cute moments to make the suffering a bit more tolerable. The worst of season 5 has little or no redeemable qualities at all, just like the worst of the other big Nicktoon cash cows of the 21st century. And when it comes to the toilet humor, the Loud House is no stranger to gross out either. It has a literal baby as one of its main characters for crying out loud. Again, no pun intended. However, while the earlier episodes only had one or two instances of grossness, the show's reliance on potty humor and how disgusting said humor got increased significantly throughout season 4 and reached its apex during season 5, to the point where we got scenes of characters unknowingly eating literal fecal matter. The Loud House isn't meant to be a celebration of the weird and crazy like Ren and Stimpy or Cat Dog. It's supposed to be a funny, heartfelt cartoon about a diverse cast of well-rounded characters working together to get along and enjoy life with each other. The worst episodes of season 5 seem to work so hard at deliberately going against what the show stands for, they make Luck and Brawl look like really loud music by comparison. And no, what I just said is not a hyperbole in even the slightest form of the word. Thankfully, the show was able to get back on the right track after its initial derailing, as season 6 has been a massive improvement over season 5 and even season 4 so far. It's been delivering highs on par with the best of the previous season far more consistently, and the worst episodes are nowhere near as boring as the worst of season 4 or frustrating as the worst of season 5. This can mean one of two things. Either the Loud House crew has recovered from a case of sophomore slump, or they'll end up pulling a Rick and Morty by following season 6 up with a season that is even worse than season 5. I sure hope the latter doesn't happen though, because I want the Loud House to have the chance to continue thriving, even if future episodes end up altering more of its status quo in the process. I don't mind the show changing, as long as those changes are in line with the values that the show has stood for in its early years. I'll be satisfied. Alrighty. That's odd. I still haven't gotten anything in my live chat yet. I'm going to go get some more water. My voice is feeling a bit raspy right now. I gotta be honest, I'm a little disappointed that quite a few of my social media friends aren't here right now. I wonder what happened to No Parking Barry or GameTube. Oh well. Okay. This next question comes from Ethan Archive. Question number 7. Who is your least favorite Loud House character? Oh yeah, I may have hinted about him, but I certainly haven't given this punk the bashing he deserves. Chandler McCann, aka the most pathetic excuse for a human being in Nickelodeon history. He actually wasn't so bad in the show's early episodes, as he was just your typical bully character used to teach Lincoln who his true friends are. In fact, the season 3 episode Jeers for Fears, which by the way was the second to last Loud House installment Chris Savino worked on, showed that he might even have some sort of self-esteem problem, as he believes that the only way to be cool is to prove he is not scared of anything. However, once Chandler started attending class with Lincoln in season 5, he instantly turned into a pretentiously obnoxious brat set to make every other student's life a living hell, with Broadcast Blues being by far the most balanced showcase of every single part of his awful personality. He beats up his classmates in a troublingly realistic manner, blackmails Lincoln into ruining his life in exchange for things he wants but can't afford, and willingly destroys other people's work just to get some sickening pleasure. Chandler is such a rotten sociopath. He makes Megan Parker look like an absolute saint who only occasionally messes things up on purpose by comparison. And yes, I'm very much aware that Chandler does get punished for his bad behavior, which is more than what I can say about characters similar to him, like Bendy from Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. However, all the comeuppance he gets feels very disproportionate when you consider how awful he consistently is. This isn't a guy who deserves to be merely sprayed by a skunk or get knocked down by a tree he didn't notice, because those types of punishments allow him to get back on his feet and keep being his sadistic self. This boy deserves to be locked up in a juvenile hall for his entire teenage life, because he's going to grow up to become a serial killer if he isn't. I wish I was joking, but I'm really not. As a matter of fact, Chandler actually made me gain an appreciation for the other bully characters in the Nicktoons universe, such as Miranda Kilgallen from As Told by Ginger, Roger Klotz from Doug, and even Francis from The Fairly Odd Parents, because they all have at least some semblance of good hidden deep within their dark hearts, which even leads to a friendship in Roger's case. I guess you could also throw in Helga Bataki from Hey Arnold, but she's too well-rounded of a character to be pigeonholed into mere bully status. This realization also makes Chandler an anomaly in the world of the Loud House. He's the only member of the show's massive cast of characters to lack any extra personality layer that sticks for more than one episode, which makes him even more frustrating of a character. If you ever decide to watch Broadcast Blues, you'll gain such an appreciation for characters like Ronnie Anne and Lynn Jr., it's not even funny. Now, Let's make this as clear as possible. What Chris Savino did was totally and irredeemably wrong, and Nickelodeon was completely in the right for firing him. However, I still can't help but wonder how season 5 would have turned out if he was still the main person in charge. Would Chandler get a redemption episode with his self-esteem problem from Jeers for Fears being used as a foundation for turning into a better person? Or would he still get flanderized like he did in the version of the season we got? I guess we'll never know. But if the Loud House crew isn't planning to get rid of Chandler anytime soon, I hope they will at least make him a lot easier to tolerate. I don't even need to necessarily like him at this rate. Just give me a reason why I shouldn't pay a tough kid $1,000 to beat him up. Okay, so question number 8 comes from Mike Unless. Mike Unsile, I think that's how it's spelled. Which series do you prefer, The Loud House or the Casagrandes? Well, as a whole, I prefer The Loud House, but Casagrandes can get good when it puts in the effort. The main problem that I have with the Casagrandes, at least early on, was that the characters didn't have as much depth as most of the Loud House characters. So it was hard for me to embrace it as much. However, while the Loud House was starting to go downhill, the Casagrandes actually managed to get really good. It's kind of fun, like, Seasons 2 and 3 expanded all of the show's characters in a way that made them almost, but not quite, as well-rounded as the Loud House characters. And I really appreciated the show for that. You know, something just hit me. The Loud House... The Casagrandes started getting really good when the Loud House was starting to slip in quality. And now that the Casagrandes has been canceled, the Loud House is starting to bounce back in quality. Coincidence? I think not. Okay. Alrighty, so now we're moving on to question number 9, submitted by another one of my longtime social media friends, Dylan the Amphibia Fan, formerly known as Loud House Fan 98 until he stopped watching the Loud House last year. Did you enjoy the movie? I personally thought it was too weird and messy. I also disliked pretty much every character's portrayal in it. I know I'm only adding fuel to the fire when it comes to my Loud House hot takes, but I actually thought the Loud House movie was great. It was definitely the most outlandish scenario yet for a typically realistic series, but I didn't mind too much because unlike many of the other times when the Loud House delved into complete fantasy territory, there was still a relatable, heartfelt element to serve as the core of the story. The desire to avoid being overlooked when it seems like you are the only one in your family without a special gift. To me, it's just like how Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island succeeded at making the monsters real without turning off its diehard fans. Because unlike other attempts at this, there was still an actual mystery to be solved, thus preserving the key elements that make the Scooby-Doo franchise so beloved in the first place. I know there are some people who say that Lincoln's portrayal in the movie was out of character. However, in my opinion, if you study the series closely, especially during season 1, you'll notice that Lincoln always kind of seems like the odd sibling out, as he's the only one of them who actually puts any effort to get what he wants. Thus, I personally think that the movie revealed a hidden side of Lincoln that we never saw before, which kept the conflicts fresh, while also not straying too far from the tried and true. I also really enjoyed the new characters, who all fit in with the show's stellar ensemble very well. Yes, even Morag, whose role as a villain brings me back to my Muppets comparison again. Both that franchise and The Loud House also have a sense of innocence that never gets naive, but also allows every character to stem from a child's perspective, which is crucial in making a series appealing to any person of any age. With this sense of innocence, even the characters who are clearly meant to be antagonists never become irredeemably sinister. Minus Chandler, of course. If only they would listen to reason. In the case of the Muppets, Doc Hopper from the original Muppet movie symbolizes a child's impulsive want to be in control of everybody, no matter how much someone's point of view clashes with their own. If you want a more modern example, Tex Richmond from the 2011 Muppets film represents how a child's disgust for something can turn into an unhealthy obsession with taking that person down, which is especially apparent when you listen to the full version of his signature song, which can only be found on the movie's Blu-ray release and soundtrack. And in the case of the Loud House movie, Morag represents a child's desire to not have anybody bother them when they want to have peace and quiet. Like any kid with that mindset, she's unaware that loudness and chaos are just a part of growing up that can only be solved by managing the craziness instead of trying to outright obliterate it. Being the man with the plan, Lincoln is aware of this, which creates a compelling contrast between him and Morag as he realizes her true colors and figures out the reasoning behind it. Morag sadly isn't able to redeem herself like Tex Richmond did, but the punishment she got for her antisocial ways probably would have been far more severe if she didn't have that childlike mentality, which would clash with the ideologies of the show. Finally, the decision to make the movie a musical was an odd choice to me, because the Loud House isn't a cartoon well known for musical numbers, unlike, let's say, Steven Universe. But hot damn, the crew behind the movie made the idea work very well. All the songs in the Loud House movie, though not quite Broadway-worthy like Steven Universe the movie's music numbers were, perfectly encapsulated the message behind the scenes they were attached to, while also being super catchy and memorably composed. You know, like all good musicals. I have no shame in admitting that I still bop to the movie's soundtrack on a frequent basis. Okay, this really isn't going anywhere right now. I kind of expected the stream to get a lot more views than it already has, and my family members are kind of, who are in the background hearing me stream this, are kind of pressuring me to take a break. So, you know what? I'm just going to end the live stream here. And I'm going to make it a 2-part stream. I figured that that would be better so that then I'll have the time to answer more of the questions that I got, including the ones that I wasn't able to write down any answers for prior to actually starting this stream. So, join me next week for part 2, when I answer the rest of the questions that I received via the comment section and reflect more on the show. Okay, so